welcome. Today I'm joined by special guest John Manning, who's the founder of Pricing Profits. He has pioneered new approaches to value-based pricing that challenge conventional wisdom, and his expertise spans B2B, B2C, health tech, aviation, financial services, and much more. Best of all, though, he is a mentor within our Giants program, and I believe at last count, I think he had done more than 90 mentoring sessions, but I'm pretty sure it's bumped up a little since then. So we are so grateful to have him join us for a pricing masterclass. And with that, I will hand over to John to take it away.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me. Yes, it's pretty well storms down in here, Melbourne. There's a lull at the moment and some blue sky, but in typical Melbourne fashion, that'll be gone before I get to slide 2 or 3. For those of you who don't know me, my name's John Manning. I've been mentoring Blackbird since Cohort 3 or Cohort 4. I run pricingprofits.com, and my contact details are there. Don't worry about screenshotting or photographing any of the slides. I will send a PDF to Joe after the session, and you can all have access to the slides. I'm going to talk about 4 things today and 4 things only. Firstly, I'm going to talk about some pricing myths. Then I'm going to talk about some pricing mistakes. I'm going to follow that up with the major part of the session today, which is about value-based pricing. And then I'm going to wrap it up with a discussion around pricing being an art or a science, and give you 7 quick and easy things that you can use to improve your pricing almost straight away. Before I jump into that, though, I want to just mention that I was at a pitch night last Tuesday night, and 7 companies were pitching. Every one of those companies got asked a question about their pricing or their business model by the judges. And interestingly enough, and I'm not claiming any credit here, nor am I claiming cause and effect, but the business that had the most value-based pricing model actually won the pitch night. But for those of you that are looking for investors and so forth, expect your pricing model or your business model to be the second or the third question that any potential investor asks you. So let's jump into it. Pricing myths, and there's a few really interesting myths about pricing. The first myth is there is no such thing as a perfect price. The perfect price for me is going to be a different perfect price to Terence, to Lucy, and anybody else on the call. Myth number 2, full price. Very few people are paying full price anymore. For the last 10, 15 years, discounts have been growing rapidly, and they need to be an integrated part of your pricing strategy. But generally, there is the thrill of the hunt. Customers love hunting down a discount, and the thrill of the kill of getting that discount, because getting that discount gives you the bragging rights to say, I got 40, 50, 60% off something. Myth number 3 is procurement. For many years, procurement were thought of as the natural enemy of pricing. I actually like to think of them as a frenemy, a portmanteau of friend and enemy. If you are in the B2B space and you know procurement people, spend time with them and understand what they do and how they do it, which is the best way to defend your price if you come up against procurement groups. Myth number 4, I believe all the world's pricing models have been created, and if you see somebody who says, I've got the world first pricing model, I doubt it very, very much. Uber, surge pricing. If you go back to 1666, you will see that the boatmen evacuating people from the Great Fire of London on the north side of the River Thames to the south side doubled or tripled their fares to do so. They had surge pricing back then. The myth of markets and the invisible hand. I'm writing an article on this at the moment, actually. You can't blame pricing on markets. The market sets the price, or the invisible hand sets prices. People set prices. Your salespeople set prices. You set prices. So there is no intangible or invisible body that does this. For those of you who studied economics, I'm an economist. I have studied economics. So I think that gives me license to take the mickey at it from time to time. But traditional economic theory teaches you some pretty basic and mythological concepts about economics and pricing these days. Demand and supply curves are based on a buyer and a seller selling one product. No industry company sells one product and just has one buyer and one seller. There are intermediaries, there are multiple products, there are adjacencies. It just is a sort of outdated way of economic thinking. The myth of cost plus pricing. I bet you I could go around the screen here and ask every person on the call why they are with the telco they are with, and nobody will say to me, I'm with Telstra, Optus, or Vodafone because I love their costs. People do not buy from companies because of their costs. They buy because of their value. And for that reason, very shortly, that will be all I say about cost plus pricing. And myth number 8, the myth of the spreadsheet. You can make every single pricing model do magnificent things in a spreadsheet. Your pricing model will always work in a spreadsheet. It's when it hits the customers that things get interesting. Myth number 9, you used to be able to get away with stealth price changes that flew under the radar. If you were a little bit under the rate of inflation, you could get away with it and so forth. And then you might remember this guy, also known as Farmer Bro. He came along and he increased a really critical drug from $13.50 a tablet to $750 a tablet overnight. He didn't expect it to be on the front page of the New York Times, and it was, and that's probably become the watershed when it comes to trying to get away with a sneaky stealth price increase. And then the last myth is that pricing models, you are set and forget things. They have life cycles. They need to be changed from time to time. What you're seeing here is an aircraft engine. Airlines used to buy these off companies like Rolls-Royce and Pratt and Whitney. They don't buy them anymore. The pricing model has changed. They are sold on power by the hour contracts. And the beautiful thing about a power by the hour contract is that when the airline is making money, then Rolls-Royce are making money. When the aircraft is not making the airline money, when it's sitting on the ground, taking passengers on and off, or catering on and off and baggage on and off, it's not making money and they're not being charged for the engine. So there's a beautiful alignment there of new pricing models. Part one done. Now, from time to time, you may recall just before COVID, Cathay Pacific sold uploaded business class airfares for the price of economy class airfares. Fantastic. A whole heap of people jumped on and grabbed them.
Coming by train? Yeah, Campbell down the station.
Sorry, somebody needs to jump on mute there. And they honoured the fare. Now, that's fine. They made a mistake and they recognised it. They took it on the chin and so forth. But yeah, what happened 2 weeks later? Exactly the same thing. So mistakes are all right. Just like Cathay Pacific, please don't try and repeat them. Learn from them. So some pricing mistakes I've seen commonly done. Leaving pricing too late in the marketing process. Think of pricing as a product development activity, not a go-to-market activity. There are some companies that design the price point first. And it's common when you are trying to hit a certain price point. Some examples of that are a $20 mobile phone, a $200 laptop, and a $1,000 car. They were all products that were built to hit those particular price points. Top-down pricing to fix the profit and loss statement. If you've got a loss statement rather than a profit statement, that is not a reason why customers are going to pay you more through your pricing. Confusing budgeting with pricing is another common mistake I've seen. Consultants saying, okay, if you're leaving your corporate gig and you're going to work for yourself and you want to earn $100,000 a year, you want to work 48 weeks in a year and so forth, you just do the division and off you go. You'll come up with a daily or an hourly rate. That's not pricing. It's got nothing to do with what customers will pay. That is more of a budgeting exercise. Number 4, I won't talk further about cost plus pricing. It makes both lists, mistakes and myths. Number 5, taking too narrow a perspective of the competition. Always look for both direct and indirect competitors when you are looking at what your competitors are charging without outsourcing your pricing to them and just following them with their pricing. A common mistake is using the same averages across all products and services. You will get fantastic results if you are fortunate enough to be able to charge some customer segments more than other segments of customers. In fact, not segmenting your customers is like that is quite common as well and makes it on the list at number 7. Number 8, mechanical price changes. In Australia, there is a real habit of prices changing on the 1st of July in corporate Australia. Obviously, because it's a new financial year and typically a new budget is starting and that new budget has a price increase assumption in it. There are much better reasons to change prices than just the calendar changing from the 30th of June to the 1st of July. Mistake number 9, not challenging industry norms. There are some industries where there are pricing norms. Pharmaceuticals is one of those. You will be pleasantly surprised what happens if you challenge some of those industry norms. Then the last one there is not changing your pricing model. Let me dive into this with some practical examples. This is what it looked like below deck on the first and the second fleets on their sailing from Southampton to Botany Bay. There was 158 out of 424 convicts that didn't survive the journey. That's 37.3% died and a 62.7% survived. And after the second fleet, there was uproar in the UK about this. What happened was they realised that they had the wrong pricing model. They had a prepaid pricing model, like a prepaid mobile plan. So they changed it to post-pay, which meant the captain got paid when the crew, when the luggage, the passengers arrived in Australia. The third and the fourth sailings from the UK to Australia, there was only 2 out of 322 convicts who didn't survive the voyage. That's 0.62%. So just the flipping of the pricing model from prepay to post-pay meant that the result was a much better outcome for all those involved. This is another lady who changed her pricing model. The lady you're looking at here is Monique Conhetti. And in 2006, she rang me up and said, John, I've launched my business with the wrong pricing model. She started a business which at the time was called Flow Car Share, but it then rebranded to FlexiCar. And she had cars parked in council-provided parking spots around Melbourne and a little bit into Sydney at the time. And each car, which you could use on a per-hour basis, took about 40 cars off the street for people who shared in that scheme. And she had launched with an hourly-based pricing model. So if you wanted to do an IKEA run or a Costco run on a Saturday afternoon, you could book a car for 2 or 3 hours at about $7 or $8 an hour, and off you go. But she quickly realised that she wasn't necessarily covering costs. And I know what I said about costs earlier, but costs help you measure profitability, but they're not a measure of pricing. And she had costs like depreciation, insurance, and so on and so forth. So she had to find a better way to do her pricing. And we looked around and we identified, and this was in the really early days of subscription models, that a subscription model would suit her better. At the time, she had 1,000 customers. And we devised the new pricing structure. We had good, better, best. And we sent an email to her 1,000 B2C customers saying, we've launched with the wrong pricing model. We need to move you onto this pricing model. It's going to cost you this amount per month. It was a subscription fee, but instead of paying $7 an hour, it might have been $2 or $3 an hour to drive the car. And that email ended with the sentence, we understand if you need to go elsewhere. She also had about 50 B2B customers. Now, these were small companies where the car was used by a little sales team to go out and customer visits and so forth. And her business development manager went into each of these 50 businesses and had a conversation with them exactly the same as what that email was. We've launched with the wrong pricing model. This is what it means for you. We understand if you need to go elsewhere. They didn't lose one single customer. 12 months later, the revenue was up 20%. and within 4 years, the business had been purchased from Monique by Hertz Rent-A-Car. So great story there of another person who recognised she needed to change her pricing model. So how do you pick a pricing model? I don't know whether you've thought about how many different pricing models are, but let me show you what the major families of pricing models are you like. And I'm using some Latin terminology here. 3 families of pricing models. On the bottom left, una tantum, or a lump sum. When you go to a restaurant and purchase a manufactured product, a fast-moving consumer goods, consumer packaged goods, you're typically paying a lump sum to own that product. And many of those industries price on the basis of cost plus pricing. Airlines, an airfare, you buy an airfare as a lump sum transaction and it gets you from Melbourne to Sydney or vice versa. But their pricing model is dynamic pricing or revenue management. Up the top there, we have subscriptions, this area of pricing that has just ballooned in the last 10 to 15 years. And there is a whole range of subscription-based pricing models. Even your utility bills have subscription-like characteristics where you pay to be on a network and you pay for what goes through the network, as well as your Microsoft 360, your Stans, your Netflix. And some of the SaaS products have moved into a modular SaaS model. And then down in the bottom right, you have ad valorem, which is Latin for according to value. So for those of you that might be using online accounting software or PayPal, lots of fintech products clip the ticket or as a percentage of value. And we have some other pricing models that fall into the overlap of the Venn diagram here. So if you look, for example, between una tantum, the lump sum, and according to value, you've got things like auction, pay what you want, or usage-based pricing, for example. In between the lump sum and the subscriptions, we don't necessarily have other pricing models, but we've got different forms of payment that have merged there. So there are subscription-like products to pay for lump sum products. Your mortgage is an example of that, hire purchase agreements, leases, and buy now, pay later. And then things like competition-based pricing, value-based pricing, and hybrids can apply to any of these types of pricing models. You'll see there's nothing in between subscription and ad valorem. I think this is a really interesting evolving quadrant to watch because I believe that AI-based pricing models are going to move into that little area there. And we're already seeing the emergence of AI-based pricing models, and it's a real challenge to seat-based SaaS pricing models going forward. So value-based pricing, we won't talk about costs anymore. We're just going to talk about value. You can jump onto any SaaS pricing page. You can have a look at proposals and so forth, and you will very often see something like this. And we can pull this apart to say what we're looking at here. What we see here is architecture, good, better, best, small, medium, and large. We are seeing operative features, things the products do. We are seeing non-operative features, things that add further differentiation to good, better, best, maybe some optional extras, and then finally a willingness to pay. And there's a bit more detail on what each of those things are there. And later on in the talk, I will come back to things like freemium and usage-based metrics, which are part of the architecture. But the real interesting one is, how do you work out what the price should be, what the value is, what the willingness to pay is? And there's 5 approaches there, but I've crossed out 2 of them because I'm not going to cover cost plus pricing, and I'm not going to outsource pricing to my competitor. But what I will do is walk you through these last 3 methodologies as a way to set your pricing. The first one is called the Van Westendorp model, or the price sensitivity meter. And you may have seen this in action. You typically get asked 4 questions around what price does a product look: cheap, expensive, too expensive, or too cheap. It's cheap, it's simple, it's easy to do, but it also has some disadvantages. What you get from that excuse me, asking those 4 questions is typically a graph that looks like this. And this, the intersection of these 4 lines gives you your pricing window, if you like. You can have a point of marginal expensiveness and a point of marginal cheapness, which are on the extremes. Your indifference price point is down the bottom, and the optimal price point is the intersection of the black and the red lines there. You can simplify this a bit. You can just work out what the net acceptability is. So here are examples of the same question, only 3 of those questions being asked, the acceptable, the expensive, and the too expensive. And then just taking the acceptable, taking the expensive away from the acceptable to get a net acceptability question. I'll give you a practical example of this. This was research that I did for a wedding service to identify whether there was a willingness to pay for a concierge organised wedding. It included things like the venue, the photographer, and stuff like that. And you can see here that there was 24.7% of respondents who had a willingness to pay $200 for that concierge service, but it dropped away outside of that. So that's a practical example of how you can ascertain the price to charge based on that Van Westendorp methodology. The second methodology is a thing called customer value analysis, and this is quite commonly used in business to consumer markets. What I might do is skip over this slide. It's quite text heavy. It's easier to explain on the on this tabular slide, and you can go back and read the text when you get the material later on. But here is the customer value analysis for a product that has 4 attributes that customers value: performance, battery life, warranty, and brand. And we've asked the customers to give us a weighting for each of those attributes. So those, the weighting is, the total of the weightings have to add to 100%. So we've got 40, 25, 25, and 10. We then go and ask them about the product we want priced, what they would rate us on a scale of 1 to 10 on performance, on battery life, on warranty, and brand. So they give us 7 out of 10 for performance. That translates to 2.8% when you just take 40% of it, and so on and so forth. That gives us a total score of 7.4 for the product being priced. At the same time, we've asked them about either a product that's already been offered or perhaps a competitive product, and we've got similar numbers for those. And those numbers there can be used, the 7.4 can be used relative to the $299, the product already priced, or the competitive product to set the price of $330. And we might end up with a value map that looks like something like this. So the $259, the $299, and the $330 price point. If your product has landed where A is, the A square there, that's not a great place to be, because you're providing less value than the $330 product at exactly the same price. But if you land on dot B there, that's not a bad place to be. That's where disruptors play, because you can offer the same amount of value at a cheaper price than the $330 product. Again, here's another practical example of that. This was some work I did for a company called Wafex a few years back. They are Australia's largest fresh flower wholesaler. That is how customers ranked them on 4 value attributes: range and product, service and support, convenience, and price, versus the competitors who are shown on the right-hand side. Now, the big difference here is that competitors are ranked very highly on price, whereas Wafex is ranked really low. What Wafex have done have focused on range, service and support, and convenience, and price has been the secondary measure when it comes to value for their customers. So that's the second approach to setting prices, using that customer value analysis. And then the third one, which is particularly common in B2B markets, is to work out what the economic value of a product or service is. This has evolved over the years. It's evolved from things like value word equations. This was what Rockwell Automation used to give to their customers and say, plug in the numbers into this equation, and if you get a result where one number is higher than the other, then you should go with our competitor. If not, you're better off with us. What economic value analysis has at its heart is working out how you deliver value to your customers. And you can generally do that in one of three ways. You can increase your customers' revenue, you can reduce their costs, or you can minimize their risk. And this table here, which you can jump back into later on, gives you examples of how revenue can be increased and how risk can be minimized. And then it's a matter of doing the calculation of working out what the magnitude of that economic value is. And then your pricing is sharing a component of that economic value created. Now, I'm just going to rewind back to a couple of points in the architecture discussion we had before. If you are interested in using a usage or consumption-based metric, there is a criteria for selecting a usage or consumption-based metric here. If you look at companies like Snowflake and Twilio, they are 100% usage or consumption-based pricing. So follow those guidelines there. If you're wondering whether you should do freemium or not, visit this page when you get the deck. There's a table here that has 10 questions regarding freemium. The more of those questions you answer with a yes, the better off your business would be having a freemium offering. It then becomes a matter of what type of free, and you can use the triangle there to guide you with that. Should you offer free time, free usage, or free features? Now, regardless of which of those pricing models you choose, you may find it beneficial to run a pilot or an early adopters program. And this is a checklist for what a pilot or an early adopters program should look like. And you can just, from this, pull together a quick one-pager to work with your early adopters to give you feedback on all aspects of your, your minimum viable product, if you like, including your pricing. Just keep in mind that there are three biases that can crawl into early adopter programs. There's a bias around brand, like you should, I believe, where possible, particularly if you've got strong brand presence, not disguise the brand who you are. The second one is you should give customers the product to play with. You can't ask them to give you hypothetical feedback because you'll just get a hypothetical price point. And likewise, you ideally want people in a pilot to part with some money. And that way they've got skin in the game and you're getting feedback on someone who is parting with money for your product or service. So they are the three approaches to value-based pricing. There's one or two others, but I don't have time to go into them in the format we've got for today. But what I'm going to do is jump into the question of whether pricing is art or science. And this is where there's a little bit of interactivity. So get your fingers ready for hitting the mute button or dropping stuff in the chat.
You can all yourself at the moment, just an FYI.
Sorry?
I was just telling participants that the mute function has been disabled, so they are to come off mute.
Thank you. Banksy's Girl with the Balloon. Now, I don't know how many of you remember, but this was sold at Sotheby's in 2018 for £1 million. Does anyone remember what happened to it on the fall of the hammer?
Got shredded, didn't it?
It did get shredded. So Banksy had hidden a shredder in the frame, as you can see there. Now, theoretically, he's destroyed this. But what happened in 2021? It sold for 18.5 million pounds. Now, science would say you've destroyed it. How can it go from 1 million pounds to 18.5 million pounds? That is where pricing is artistic rather than scientific. There's been another example in the last week or so, which I have not been able to keep up with, but somebody has stuck a banana on a wall with a bit of gaffer tape and it sold for $6 million or something. Again, if pricing was a science, someone would be able to predict that. But there are certainly scientific application ways you can apply science to application to pricing. These two matrices here are really simple examples of what volume increase you require to offset a price decrease and what volume you put at risk by a price increase. So there you can use science in the world of pricing. But when people, there are other examples as well. Anne Hathaway presented the Oscars. Berkshire Hathaway stock price rose $2.94%. She got in a car crash and Berkshire Hathaway stock dropped 0.84%. The technology was confusing Berkshire Hathaway with Anne Hathaway. And if you're not familiar with Berkshire Hathaway, it is Warren Buffett's company. So there's an example where the science can get it wrong. I'm going to talk now about behavioral economics. Who's a fan of this company? Yep. Okay. Reasons why. Why are you a fan? Terence, come off mute.
I was a big fan because everything, the first time I used an Apple product, everything served me. I just felt like taking care of the customer. When they lost me, if I can add this, do you want to know?
Go on. You started now.
After Steve Jobs was no longer, and they brought out the Apple Maps version, and they brought it out deliberately knowing that it wasn't proficient yet, and they wanted to use users to validate and improve the product. And that's when I thought that's no longer for me.
Okay. Chris and Kirsten, who I've had a session with, they say that they make technology sexy. Bronwyn says, I also like shiny exteriors. Anybody else? So I'll tell you the really interesting thing here. I have asked this question over and over again in workshops like this, and nobody ever says to me, I love Apple's pricing. Nobody has ever said, I like Apple's pricing. And I'm going to, I could just get my keyboard to work. You know what Apple have really successfully done is they have desensitized customers to price and sensitized them to value. So all of those things that everybody is just talking about, the sexiness, the branding, all that sort of stuff, that is value. That's why people buy it. They don't buy it because of the price. Now, this graph here is quite old, and it's based on PCs rather than all the other products they have. But at this time, price was 2% of a purchase decision of an Apple PC. That means 98% of the decision came around value. Offer customers choices. Give customers 3 choices. If you give customers 1 choice, you've got a 50-50 chance of closing the deal, and that is it. If you give customers 2 choices, they will make a price-based decision. About 60% of the time, on average, they will choose the cheapest option. But if you give them 3 options, there's 2 things that happen. The first thing is the customer says to themselves, which one do I buy? And that's a different question to asking themselves, do I buy? The second thing that happens is they need to work out why there is a difference between the 3 prices. So they are making a value-based decision. The technical term for this in the world of pricing is Goldilocks pricing. Not too hot, not too cold, just right. Good, better, best. You saw it before in the with the SaaS pricing example. Now, if you're doing three options, whether it is on a pricing page on your website, whether it's a pitch deck proposal for a customer, put the cheapest product on the right-hand side of the page. Sorry, it's your cheapest product on the right, the most expensive on the left. So you see on the table on the left-hand side, the average selling price across those three products, where the cheapest is on the left and the most expensive is on the right, is $280. Flip those two around, the average price goes up to $330. This is a behavioral economics phenomenon. People see the most expensive and then everything else is cheaper, but nobody wants to be a tight ass. Whereas when you see the cheapest first, everything else is more expensive, and people tend not to explore to the right of the pricing page or the pitch deck or the proposal or whatever. Which of these is the best option? The one on the left, the one on the right? Go in the chat now. Left. Yeah. It's good to see the guys voting on the dresses too. Good stuff. Now, in traditional economics, economists would say there is no difference between these two offers. They are both $60, so nobody should favor one over the other. This is where behavioral economics comes in and says, no, you're wrong here. People can see that the one on the left, they are getting a bargain. They're getting the thrill of the hunt and the thrill of the kill if they buy it. Therefore, show customers that you're getting a deal. Right. This is not a question for today in Melbourne, but imagine that you are on your favorite beach, hot day, you want a drink, and I say to you, I'm going to go and get us two of your favorite drinks. Let's keep it simple. Let's just go your favorite ice cold beer. And I am going to go to this 5-star hotel at the end of the beach and get a beer. How much is everyone prepared to pay for the beer? Someone put a price in the chat. Go to this 5-star hotel, hot day, cold beer. What are you going to pay for it? $15. Okay, that fantastic. Now, okay, so stop there, Sam and others, the guys that said $15. I've just changed my mind. I've just realized that I can go to the rundown grocery store at the other end of the beach and I can get the same beer at the same temperature. How much are you prepared to pay now? I'm walking, not you. Okay, Simon's gone to 7. None. Arbitrage at 12. So this is a famous, you can stop in the chat now. This is the famous beer on the beach experiment run by Richard Taylor, who won the 2017 Nobel Prize in Economics. And he asked a whole bunch of people how much they were prepared to pay for a beer on a hot day just last year. And the average price was $260 versus about $150. Exactly the same thing. What has happened here is your context in which the purchase is being made has changed. So one of the things I often say to people, do you want to be a 5-star hotel or do you want to be a rundown grocery store? Because if you want to be a 5-star hotel and charge premium prices, change the context in which your prices have appeared. I used to work at car sales. I overhauled one of their pricing models for a website they have called Bike Sales. In the background on their pricing page was a dirt bike. I got the background image changed to the biggest, meanest Harley Davidson I could get a picture of. And it changed the context in which the prices appeared. You know, it uplifted it rather than being behind, sitting on a page with a dirt bike covered in mud. It was bright, shiny, spanking Harley Davidson. Offer decoys. Decoys are fantastic ideas, either at the bottom of the product ladder or the top of the product ladder. The menu and the plate you see on the left-hand side there comes from the Le Méridien Hotel in New York City at a cafe called Norma's, where you can buy a $1,000 lobster frittata. And you can see on the menu there, Norma dares you to expense this. Not many people buy it, but it does make the $100 lobster frittata very attractive. Also in New York City, there is a restaurant called Serendipity 3. They have 6 or 7 Guinness World Records for the most expensive product. And there's the press release there for their $200 chips, which are sprinkled with gold dust, edible gold dust. So they may not sell a lot of them, but it helps sell other products. The example there on the bottom from Telstra is for a 2 gigabyte ASD broadband plan. I don't know anybody who would probably get through. Everyone I know would get through 2 gigabytes before lunchtime. But what it does, it gets you on their product ladder. And Telstra have this concept called the ARPU accelerator, the average revenue per user. And that gets you from the 2 gigabyte plan to the 5 gigabyte plan to the 10 gigabyte plan, and off you go. And then finally, this from Adobe earlier this year. Adobe were experiencing a fair bit of churn. And one of the things they did was they got their customer success people to ask their customers, why did you, before you cancel, can I just ask you, why did you originally buy this from us? And just asking them that question raised retention rates by 8.84%. It was just money for jam, really. So there are 7 pricing quick wins courtesy of behavioral economics for you. Sensitize your customers to value, not price. Offer 3 choices. Put the cheapest product on the right-hand side of your page. Tell customers they're getting a deal. Manage the context where your prices are seen. Consider decoys, and ask customers, remind customers why they purchased from you. Look at that, Joe. 15 minutes for Q&A. The floor is open, ladies and gentlemen. What?
Incredible. I'm going to ask everyone, if you have a pricing question for John, now is the time to put it into the chat. But Hamid has kicked us off with 2 already. So I'm just going to read them out, and feel free to expand if I haven't covered it. But Hamid says, you mentioned people brag about buying things on sale. Would they do the same if they haggled for the product? And in your opinion, which one would they brag more about?
Well, that's if you want to come off mute and we can have that discussion, that would be interesting. My answer to that question would be, if you are talking in Australia, then I don't think Australians like haggling too much and haven't had a lot of practice of it. But if we're talking Asia, Middle East, the souks markets in the Middle East and so forth, that might be a different kettle of fish. One of my favorite videos, which I actually use in pricing workshops, is on YouTube, and it's the Harry the Haggler scene from Monty Python's Life of Brian. Now, if you're not familiar with it, go and watch it, but there is a scene there where somebody is trying to haggle with Harry the Haggler, and it's a very funny scene. Does that answer your question?
It does, but I also want to challenge your opinion about Australia for 2 reasons. Number one is, I feel like the population in Australia is getting a lot more coming from those areas you mentioned, Middle East and China and Asia. So I think just generalizing it might be, not like maybe 10, 20 years ago, I guess. And to cover that, I did a survey because they were saying the same thing about UK and Australia, in Canada and US. And my survey showed 95% of the people said they would haggle in a store. And actually 80% they said they do haggle in a store, and 95% said they would do online. So I want to challenge you, with all the respect.
and Hubbard, you've got a haggling product, so
I
maybe you might be closer to it than me. And you may also have people who you've surveyed who like haggling for that very reason. So I don't think there's any right or wrong answer there. Yeah.
Right.
I might just jump to your second question, which was actually SaaS products usually have 3 to 4 subscription packages with each having a range of features, meaning that to have an additional feature, you may have to jump 1 to 2 tiers and pay much higher. Do you agree with this model, or does it have to change to be flexible and feature-based pricing?
That's look, that answer, it's a really it depends type answer. Um, it is a great way for companies, SaaS companies, to grow their revenue, but it can also be difficult to execute on. So I don't know whether how many people may have experienced this, but back in May, Xero announced that they were overhauling their product ladder. And previously, they had 2 products where payroll was part of the accounting software. And then they removed it to only 1 product. Therefore, if you were on the lower product and you had to go up, you had to pay a certain number of employees by payroll, you had to go up to their higher spec product. So there was a forced upsell there. So I think there are situations where companies, force that sort of growth in revenue from their customers, but there are others where generally the customer accepts that they are taking on, they need more functionality, and that comes with a price associated with it.
Awesome. Thanks, John. I've got a question here from Alistair, which is, you mentioned most companies sell with a discount. I could be wrong, but I don't think Apple or AWS do this. Is there a benefit to never offering discounts?
Apple, so Apple do have discounts, but it's usually, very rarely is it Apple funding the discount. So if you go into Woolies and you see 10% off Apple cards in the voucher section, there's a pretty good chance that Woolworths are funding that. And there are advantages of that. It's part of Apple's brand positioning. Likewise, a lot of the luxury manufacturers, whether they are suitcases like Louis Vuitton or other fashion accessories and so forth, they'd like to keep either control over their discounting or minimize their discounting because it's part of their brand positioning. But there are other companies that play the discounting game.
Nice. I've got a question from Suman, which is, can you come back to the why purchase from us? Do you want Suman to expand on
Yeah, do you
that?
want to come off mute?
Yes.
No?
Yes. Hi. It was regarding that slide where, before this you had that Adobe picture. I didn't understand that bit. So would you be okay to before this slide, you sort about
8.84% retention.
yeah. I mean, I just missed. I don't know what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
that yeah.
so Adobe had some really interesting challenges earlier in the year. I can't remember the exact detail of it. It was quite possibly associated with the introduction of artificial intelligence into some of their products and a very hefty price increase to accompany that. Very similar to what Canva did. Canva tried to push through a 300% price increase justified on the basis of integrating artificial intelligence into their product. But whatever it was at Adobe, whether that was right or was something different, they were experiencing a lot of customers who wished to cancel their subscription. So those customers were they were being put through to customer success people, and those customer success people had been instructed to ask this question: why did you originally buy for this? And it improved their retention rate by 8.84%.
I see. So more about reminding the value they were originally. Yeah.
Yeah, taking them back to that point in time where I'm buying Adobe I'm really looking forward to getting into this and using this product.
Thanks. Yeah, that's
Awesome. I've got a question from Bron, which is, what are some tips when the economy is tight and people don't want to spend much? What are some good ways to continue getting revenue?
Um, I I have an entire presentation on that. And if she wants to email me, I will get a copy of that presentation to her afterwards. There is just so much to unpack in that question that I probably couldn't do it the answer justice, I'm afraid.
Awesome. In that case, we'll go to Sam, which is what says, what does it mean to have a low cost to service model for freemium customers?
Okay, so I think if I ask for a show of hands on how many people here were using LinkedIn for free, there would be probably about 75% of people would put their hand up. And every one of you can raise a ticket, ask for help on stuff from LinkedIn, but they're not getting any revenue from you guys. That for them will make this collective of people a high cost to serve component of their customer base. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, I was just having a look at the 10 question table that was in your slide, and that was the second one. So I was just trying to understand what makes something low cost of service model for freemium. Like, is it the full service offering a free user has, or is it the step up from moving them from freemium to paid?
So let me answer this another way. When I'm working with SaaS companies and I say to them, okay, let's build out greater differentiation on these packages based on your customer support and service model. And the cheapest package may have support 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, guaranteed response in 72 hours sort of thing. The gold package, you get the CEO's mobile phone number if you need support. That sort of thing. So just, there is different levels of support and all those other non-operative functions that help create further differentiation between your $20, your $60, and your $200 product.
Does that, just to build on that, Joe, does that kind of mean that you want to have a model where your higher tier paying customers are kind of covering the cost of those like freemium ones, so you're not really having to do much to serve them?
It can certainly help your unit economics, yes.
Yeah.
I was more thinking like if your original cost was low, right? Like I mean, then you can afford to have a lot of people to build the ecosystem and then charge only to the someone who can afford to pay, right? Or who gets the more value. That's also, I mean, you can't give everything for free unless there is, you're paying really low. Your running cost is very low as well, right?
Yeah. And it also depends if you're in the enterprise space or the SME space and so forth. So, I see a lot of companies in the enterprise space where their success and support model is just a percentage of their recurring revenue spend, which can get challenging as well when you've got usage and consumption based giving you variable recurring revenue.
Awesome. Lucy, while you're up there on the screen, just getting around to your question now, which is how often should you inspect your pricing structure or change your pricing, not to be too reactive but responsive?
So you're probably picking up on my comment about most Australian companies changing their pricing on the 1st of July and so forth.
Yeah.
I think at a minimum, that is what you want to do. You want to do an annual review of your pricing.
Yeah.
But there are situations where it makes sense to do it more at different times. So if you've got a new competitor that comes into the market, that is a reason to have a look at your pricing. If you've got a competitor who leaves the market, that's a good time to have a look at your pricing. If you're in a regulated market and there are regulatory changes, that would be a good reason to look at your pricing. If you've added more value to your product, which is inherent in, say, cloud-based SaaS, that is a good reason to look at your pricing. So there's a whole lot of better reasons to look at pricing than just the calendar changing.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Nice. I've got 2 questions from Lachlan, so I might invite you to come off mute and you can ask them yourself.
Yeah, certainly. So we've been forced, well, not forced, but kind of forced to offer in-app subscriptions in our platform, and then Apple obviously then take that 30% tax, which is amazing, on all revenue. So besides offering the plans or the subscriptions on your portal, do you have any recommendations or have any strategies to get users more onto your portal to subscribe? You know, I know it impacts then the experience they have on the app. Do you have any sort of experience there?
I can give you a practical example of how one company got around the Apple tax. So as I mentioned before, I used to be head of pricing at carsales.com. Now, theoretically, if you had the car sales app and you wanted to sell your car, Lachlan, as a private seller, you could set up the ad online through the app, and you could go and photograph the car and so forth. And if you did that in the app, I had created pricing that was tiered according to the value of the car. So when you go to sell your $200,000 Maserati, Lachlan, you're going to pay the maximum price, but to advertise that, and Apple would clip the ticket at 30%. Now, I don't know if this is still valid, but the way car sales got around this was right at the end of that checkout process, there was an option to order a sticker to go in the back of your car that had a unique number on it and said, "My car is on car sales. Find it with this number." And you still see cars driving around with those things on it. That made the purchase an analog purchase and avoided the 30% tax.
Like a
the
physical
Apple tax.
product. Yeah.
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 That is the best example I could give you of how to get around the Apple tax. Try and make it an analog purchase in some way or the other.
Yeah. That's good.
Or buyable or purchasable off your website.
Yeah. I had one other question just regarding trial periods as well. So do you recommend sort of forcing them to pick a plan as they start the trial period? Or do you recommend just give them a trial period, initiate, no credit card required, free for all for X amount of days, and then get them to pick the plan that's appropriate at the end of the trial period?
I haven't seen any conclusive research on that one way or the other. What I have seen is that I have seen a comparison or an A/B test, if you like, of credit card up front and no credit card up front. No credit card up front gives you a huge funnel, a huge number of customers that go through. And then when they hit the end of the period and they're asked for a credit card number, there's a small number that drop through. The funnel when there is no credit, when there is credit card up front, is a lot narrower. You don't get that many customers, but it's almost an identical number that drop through to the paid option afterwards. So I can't really answer your question, but I think that funnel, the people dropping through the next level of funnel are identical regardless of whether it's credit card up front or not. What I have seen getting increasingly common now, though, is get a discount to skip the trial. So instead of doing a 30-day trial, you get 20% off for 2 months to skip the trial and just go straight to paid. And I'm seeing that used more and more frequently. So I think that's something that's got legs.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for that. Appreciate it.
Awesome. This is the last question from Jose, which is referring to the dress example of pricing. Didn't Woolworths and Coles get sued by ACCC for using that illusory technique? And maybe more broadly, are there any regulatory implications for doing that sort of pricing?
I'm not sure that that's an example of what it depends. It depends on what the cost of the dresses were, which is where I think the Coles and Woolies are getting into a little bit of trouble. So I'm not really sure that that is a like for like comparison. There is certainly really good resources on the ACCC's websites around what you can and what you can't do with pricing and discounting and so forth. And it wasn't so long ago where rugs were permanently on sale. So you've got to sales have got to be they've got to be real sales. They're not just putting the price up to put it down and so forth. So I'm probably not answering that question, but what I would do is have a look at the resources on the ACCC's website about what you can and can't do with pricing. A lot of that is driven by suppliers, farmers, and stuff like that, who are the ones that are up in arms. And in those sorts of industries, the suppliers price to Coles. In any industry, in fact, you price to your customer. You cannot price to your customer's customers. So when you go and buy a Kit Kat from Nestle, the price is from Coles. The price has been set by Coles. It's not set by Nestle.
Awesome. And that actually brings us to the end of our questions. We actually had one last question from Hamid, which won't get covered today, but he asked, would you come back for another session on behavioral economics surrounding SaaS products? But for that, I might have to ask Hamid to contact you directly. And on the conclusion of this call, we will be sharing all of the presentation materials as well as contact details if you're interested in chatting more with John about pricing. But without further ado, can I get everyone to give a huge round of applause to John for just such an epic session? We had some amazing questions in there as well.
Thank you, everyone.